Hello, everybody. My name is Mabon Ninan. I'm from the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering from the University of Cincinnati. And I'm here to present my work, Portability of Deep Learning Side-Channel Attacks Against Software Discrepancies. This is a joint collaboration with my fellow co-author Chenggang Wang and our second author Reilly and Joel Ward, and our advisors Dr. Will Hawkins, Boyang Wang, and John Emmert. So, what is a side-channel attack? A side-channel attack is an attack where an attacker analyzes the power of a target, in our case a microcontroller, when it runs encryption. Tiny AES is the encryption we use for the purposes of this study, and uses it to recover the encryption key. Now, you might be wondering how and why is this possible? That is because power consumption is correlated with the intermediate values of encryption. In our study, it's the S box value. In general, the byte 00 consumes lesser power than the byte FF. Deep learning side-channel attacks. So, deep learning side-channel attacks offer some certain advantages over traditional attacks, such as CPA and template attacks. They require no pre-processing over power traces. They're able to defeat countermeasures such as masking and random delays. And they're able to recover the keys with a smaller number of test traces. Now, deep learning side-channel attacks are further classified into two types. Profiling attacks, where you have a separate training and a test device, which is the focus of this study, and non-profiling attacks, where you have only a test device. So, a profiling side-channel attack. So this is our setup for a profiling side-channel attack. We have a training device from which we collect the plain texts, the key, and the power traces. And we also capture the plain text and the traces from the test devices. Now we recover the key of the unknown test device traces. So there are two scenarios that we explore in this paper. That is the same device where we conduct our experiments on the same microcontroller, and a cross-device scenario where we train the model using traces and the key from one device and attack a completely different microcontroller with a different key. So the general idea is distribution shifts occur between the binaries compiled on device A and device B. So existing studies in cross-device scenarios. So the effectiveness of portability of profiling side-channel attacks in cross-device settings. Can a machine learning classifier still recover keys against distribution shifts? So existing studies primarily focus on discrepancies caused due to hardware and key. And the general observation is any form of discrepancy leads to a performance drop in the attack. Now, what do I mean by this? A greater number of keys, test traces are required to reveal the key. And in some cases, it even fails to recover the key. So, our contributions. So we want to explore the portability of side-channel attacks against software discrepancies which have not been explored too much. So the overall concession is we want to look at distribution shifts caused by hardware, key, and software discrepancies. And we wish to answer two research questions by this paper. The first research question is, to what degree can software discrepancies impact the portability of deep learning profiling side-channel attacks? And the second research question is, how can an attacker overcome or mitigate software discrepancies and still recover keys? So the four key factors leading to software discrepancies that we have narrowed down and conducted our experiments are random delays, compiler optimizations, instruction rewritings, and code obfuscations. And from an attacker's perspective, there are three main mitigations that we explored. Adjusting the points of interest of traditional models, domain adaptation, and multi-domain training. Our first finding is that every factor of software discrepancy leads to an attack performance drop. As you can see here, apart from random delay, it actually fails to recover the key in all other software discrepancy cases. Our second finding is that it is still possible for us to recover the key by certain adjustments to the model. So as you can see in this table, there are some performance improvements by making small changes, which we will discuss further. So this is our overall collection setup, and our assumption is that we run the same AES encryption code, in our case tiny AES, on both microcontroller devices, but the binaries are different on the training and test device. This could be due to a number of factors such as compiler version, system configurations, etc. And the idea behind this is different binaries lead to different instructions which cause different leakages. So here the distribution shifts are not just due to hardware and key, but also the dominating factor here is software. So here we have a sample power trace. A power trace is a time series sequence of power measurements when a device runs AES encryption. So here is the AES sub-bytes first round, and the intermediate values of sub-bytes are what we observe here. Now, our model works 1 byte at a time, so our encryption is a 16-bit encryption, which means an attacker would have to go through it 16 times to recover the whole key. And it gives us 256 possible values between 00 and FF. And points of interest are used to narrow down the measurements of AES sub-bytes of the first round in our sample trace. So here we have a sample for STM32F, which is a common microcontroller chip, and we narrowed down the points of interest to 1200 to 2200. So leakage models and metrics. Our paper, we leverage the Hamming weight model. There is a correlation between the power value and the Hamming weight of an intermediate value. A trace's label of Hamming weights is the intermediate value. And we provide the model with 9 classes ranging from 0 to 8. Key ranking or guess entropy is our metric that we use to measure our performance. The rank of a correct key against 256 keys given n traces is this value. When the value of key ranking reaches 0, it indicates that the model was successfully able to recover the key. KRC is the number of test traces required for the rank to converge to 0. So here we have a sample data collection setup which consists of 2 XMega chips and 2 STM32F chips. We leverage a chip whisperer board to capture our power traces, which has an attached oscilloscope to it. And the idea behind having 2 PCs is so that they have different instructions and different compilers, which give us a different power trace. As you can see here, there is a difference between XMega's unmasked version and masked version, highlighted in the blue box. So different optimizations also lead to different patterns. So here we have a sample STM32 chip with 3 different optimizations, O1, O2, and O3, and also the default optimization. As you can see that each optimization leads to a change in the power patterns. Now, if you were to use the same points of interest from your traditional OS model, we observed that we have failed to recover the key in all the optimization cases. So that is, a CNN fails to recover keys against discrepancies due to different optimizations. So the reason behind this is we leverage something called NICV, which is normalized interclass variance, which gives us the leakage points of every data set. You can see that there is a shift in the target byte points. Now, one way we can mitigate this is by adjusting the points of interest over the test data. This reveals the key sometimes, but not in all cases, which is represented by this graph. So as you can see in O3, we failed to recover the key even though we adjusted the points of interest. Adversarial domain adaptation is another method we looked into. Here we have, it primarily consists of 3 main things: a feature extractor, a source classifier, and a domain discriminator. So the idea behind this is, while training a model, we put a little bit of the target data, and we hope that the source classifier can increase the accuracy, while the domain discriminator can reduce the discrepancy between the data from the 2 different software. But this is something that's been explored in image processing, and our study found that it does not work in side-channel attacks in any case. Multi-domain training. So Multi-domain training is when you train a model using traces from all possible software configurations. So in our case, we took data from the standard optimization, O1, O2, O3, and trained a model using that. And we tested it with all the other test cases separately. As you can see, it was successfully able to recover the key using fewer traces. The limitation of this is we would then assume that an attacker would have to know all the possible software settings in advance, which is feasible but difficult to scale. Instruction rewriting. So the next software discrepancy that we observed is the instruction rewriting. Here we replace 2 of these redundant bytes and insert 2 new dummy instructions and we move the remaining instructions down by 2 bytes. The idea behind this is this causes a shift in where the leakage occurs. However, we can see that the model was still able to recover the key, though we see a significant performance increase when you shift the model into the new position. So here we have a sample of code obfuscations. Different obfuscations cause different patterns. So we examined 3 main code obfuscations, that was flatten, split, and encode. And as you can see, they all cause different binaries, which cause different leakage models. So our finding from this said that adjusting the points of interest again helped reveal the key, but it did not work in all cases. Example, it never worked in the case of split as an obfuscation. So more factors can lead to software discrepancies, example, compiler version. And we also examined only one CNN architecture in this paper. So we wish to expand this to different architectures models and see what performance they offer. And we also want to focus on adversarial domain adaptation with a simple architecture of a single convolution layer domain discriminator. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. Now it's time for questions. Okay, so yeah, sure, please go ahead.
So earlier in the presentation, right before the end, you talked about, so you were able to use your neural network to determine the keys in some cases, but not others. Can you explain what exactly did a fail state in your model when it failed to determine the key? What did that actually look like?
So because we use the Hemingway model, so we created a term called key ranking, which is our guess entropy. And if that value never reached 0, we concluded that we were not able to recover the key. So that basically means that we were not. So a Hamming weight is a distance between a 1 and a 0 between 2 different values. So when we say we have a Hamming weight of 0, it means that all your values match. So they are the same values of 0s and 1s at the same position. So when we say we failed to recover the key, we were not able to match all the bytes together.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. So you mentioned that with the different optimization options, there's a difficulty in scaling it. Did you investigate how bad the scaling was, so that if you add like, there's 8 variations, how far it go down?
Yeah, so the thing with different optimizations is it essentially means that the compiler compiles the hex code that we run on our microcontroller differently. And the way we sort of investigated this is by inserting something called NUOP operations. So there were certain cases where it completely shifted and we had to move our window further down. So in this paper, we used a window of 0 to 5,000, but that's because we didn't want to collect unnecessary data. But there were cases where it completely shifted and we had to search through the power trace to find that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great talk. When you're looking to deploy these kinds of attacks in a sort of real-world setting, I imagine that one of the problems where exactly in the power trace graph the key stuff is happening. What's the kind of state of work into analyzing traces for those regions? And does this work kind of do you input an aligned trace into this model, or is it unaligned?
Okay, so for this research, it is a lined trace, but we sort of had to figure that out manually by, like I mentioned before, inserting new-op operations before and after encryption runs. So when you insert a new-op operation, you will see a curve in the power pattern, and that's caused because of it running a blank operation continuously. So in terms of finding it, that's how we did it for the purposes of this research.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? I do have one question, and it's a very broad one. So given there are already classical methods such as simple power analysis and differential power analysis proposed long time ago, so have you seen what kind of information we can learn when those are applied compared to applying this deep learning?
Okay, that's actually a very interesting question. I'm glad you asked it. So CPA, or correlation power analysis, is one of the traditional methods that exists for recovering the key. And the thing with CPA is you need a lot of sample traces for you to recover the key. So essentially for power, that ranges from anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 traces for the normal optimization. And it is very sensitive to different software settings. In fact, in some cases, it doesn't even work. Deep learning allows us to do it with 2 traces or 3 traces. So there's a significant performance increase when you leverage deep learning models. So that was sort of our finding.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting to know. And second, so what kind of message you have for software developers and also for vendors in order to mitigate the problems you discovered in this study?
I mean, the whole purpose of this is to explore the research in terms of what are the possible outcomes there are from this type of attack. So sort of leveraging, so rather than using default encryption, probably adjust it to make it in such a way that it's difficult for an attacker's perspective to leverage their weaknesses is something we wish to achieve through the study.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's thank the speaker.
Thank you.